I'm back, and this video is about why indies will not save the gaming industry. At least not in the way you think. Now, you'll hear many people say that indie games are going to somehow revitalize the industry. Indie games account for less than 5% of the total revenue of the gaming industry. 5%, okay? That's like basically asking an ant to carry an elephant, okay? It's impossible. Yes, an ant can carry many times its own weight. It's very efficient, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to carry what an elephant can carry. Sorry. But that doesn't mean that indies don't have a place in the video game industry. They do. A very important place. But they aren't going to save the video game industry. They aren't going to somehow resurrect it. Now, you have to understand the strengths of being an indie. Okay? Indies are using smaller budgets. Okay? If they go under budget, it might just sink them. So they have to be very conscientious of how much they're spending. And they tend to have a bigger profit margin than these bigger publishers, okay? Because they don't have to sell as much in order to make a profit. For example, if you spent $2 million making a game, right? And if you spent $2 million making a game, you only have to spend, and it's like a $30 game. You only have to sell only a certain amount of copies in order to actually make your money back and turn a profit. If you spent $100 million making a game and another $100 million and maybe $150 million advertising it, that's a lot of money. That is a lot of money, okay? And that's a lot of copies you have to sell in order to break even. Okay, and then there's even more you have to spend in order to, that's just for making the game. For advertisement, you have to spend even more to cover the advertisement. Then you have to spend even more covering the, to make a profit. Yeah, I said it. Now, that's a simple fact, okay? I own a small business. I know very much about covering your profit. For example, the first year I was in business, we were going to try and simply go with our machines. So we had a token system. People would put in a certain amount of money, and we would get a certain amount of money back, and that would cover. We were going broke trying to do that. If we were lucky, some months we would break even. Like during the summer months, those 3-4 months, we broke even. But come winter and spring, we were going broke, okay? We were going completely broke. Because we couldn't break even. So, that leads me to my first point. Simply speaking, shit happened. Now, the second thing, indies keep their budgets in line, and they tend to be able to make a bigger profit. But they aren't getting the same impact as, blockbuster exclusives. When I say a blockbuster exclusive, I don't mean an exclusive that you spent $100 million to make that game. For example, I don't know how much Nintendo spends making their Marios, their Zeldas, their Metroids. I'm pretty sure they aren't spending $100 million. I'm reasonably certain. Their games are good, they're very well made, but they aren't spending that much money on them, okay? Part of the reason Nintendo makes a profit, they aren't spending themselves into the red, hoping that this one game's going to make or break them. In a previous vid I mentioned that Midway and Acclaim was always one flop away from going bankrupt, okay? When they released Turok, Shadow Man, back in the N64 days, those games, they were successful. They made money off of them, but if those games had flopped, they would have gone under in the N64 days. That tells you something. Okay? I mean, being one game away from a flop is not good. Nope. Indie games tend to be smarter with their money, their budgeting. For example, Nintendo basically has been making their Wii U dev kits free for indie games, and basically subsidizing the Unity development kit. Unity is is a basic gaming development platform. A lot of indies use it, and it's easy to use. I mean, it's relatively easy to use, and I mean, you know, indies have been flocking to the Wii U. I think the Wii U will be the indie platform of this current generation. It used to be next generation, but now it's current. So everything's out. So, what does this tell us? You know, but you're never gonna make like these huge meaty games. They don't have the budget for it to do it. Okay, you're not gonna get a Skyrim, a Chrono Trigger, a Final Fantasy out of an indie game unless they're using retro style from back in the day. You're not gonna see the equivalent to now RPGs now on from an indie studio, and that's just, I mean, it's a fact of life, really. Now that brings me to my third point about indies. Okay, indie games are, I mean, the thing is like indie developers cannot afford to put out multiple projects like a big developer can. Okay, a big development studio can. So in that way, they are kind of hamstrung. They're, you know, one hit because they're smaller. Now, if indie games wanted to be smarter, you would find some indie studios banding together and becoming the mid-level studios that we used to have back in the day that produced games like Shadow Man and, you know, Gauntlet Legends and that type of thing. These studios, you know, like Double Fine might team up with Just Add Water to, you know, release, you know, games that would help. I mean, 2 or 3 indie studios combined together could make a dandy mid-level studio, and they could, but they would no longer be indies. They would be mid-level, you know, studios, and there's nothing wrong with mid-level studios. As in my previous video I stated, you need all tiers in order to have a healthy industry. Okay, you can't just have the creme de la creme. You can't just have multi-million dollars to develop blockbusters that have to sell millions in order to be profitable, and indie games that if they sell 200,000, 300,000, they've made their money back. Okay, okay, if an indie game took $2 million to make, or let's make it even smaller. If an indie game took $1 million to make, and they're selling it for $15, and they sell 100,000 copies, they've paid for how much they spent to make it, and they've paid their salaries. For a team of like maybe 3 or 4 people, everyone's gotten paid. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. Kickstarter has really helped indies do that, but you don't have that mid-level publisher that's making a quality game, not top quality, like a single A, a double A game, you know, a B, C rating game in the middle that can kind of, you know, balance it out. You don't have that. Now, you know, you've seen a lot of big publishers releasing HD remakes of things, but they weren't really very well done. To tell you the truth, the only HD remake I've seen that, and the reason this is important is because HD remakes have kind of been kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of bigger publishers have been using HD remakes as kind of a stopgap measure to take the place of third middle tier games. But I haven't really seen very well done HD remakes. I mean, I recently got I upgraded from my 60 gigabyte bundle that came with like 3-4 games from a Black Friday many years ago to a 250 gigabyte model that came with an HD Jack and Daxter collection. And it's a shitty HD Jack and Daxter collection. Now, I may be spoiled because I'm comparing HD remakes to Okami HD on the PS3 or Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD, and those are very well done HD remastered graphics. But I mean, it looks terrible. I mean, and I have an HD TV in my man cave. My PS3 is hooked up in my man cave. The HD is freaking awesome. Mwah! But what you gonna do? So, in conclusion, indies are not going to save the gaming market because they simply don't have the clout to really do it. They do have some positives going for them, but they're also their weaknesses. They're good at budgeting because they have smaller budgets. They have to optimize what they can do with their smaller budget. But their strength, small budget, is also their weakness, small budget. Number two, just sheer size-wise, they're smaller and they can only focus on smaller projects. And just like you need small indie-style games, $5, $10, $15 games, you also need your $50, $60 games. And lastly, you know, this connects to the size thing. Indie developers, if they really could save the industry, would be able to put out multiple projects. And the best way they could do this without sacrificing their mobility is to simply, for indie developers to team up and work on either joint projects or, and this could work, merge together to create mid-tier development studios. And that would be helpful, but, I mean, whether or not that happens, probably not. So, this is the end of my indie vid. Stay tuned for another one coming out later on today where I discuss why I strongly dislike Microsoft. Stay tuned.